Hi, and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads. Today we are continuing in our story, Shoeless Joe, by W.P. Kinsella. I misspoke last video. I'm sorry. This video is actually part 2, section 7. I think, but it'll be in the description. So if I say the wrong thing on the video, I'll correct myself in the description. Anyway, last video, J.D. Salinger did agree to get in the car with Ray and go to, I think it's Fenway Park where the Red Sox play. And they were even stopped by a police officer, and J.D. Salinger didn't turn him in. So apparently he's got some interest in following through and seeing what's going on. Sorry. All right. Shall we begin? I often get caught in thunderstorms. While clouds slowly levitate from the western horizon, or even when they come rolling in, I remain too long in the fields or at the ballpark, long after the first giant drops have plopped on the green painted board beside me, or the corn is bent, leaning away from the wind. I have, it seems, absorbed perhaps by osmosis, science word, some of Annie's optimism. Only when I am wet as a bathed cat do I accept that the clouds are not going to veer to one side or the other. My mother reads the weather forecasts in the newspaper and believes them religiously, even though they are generally less truthful than statements made by diplomatically reliable resources. Thus, she perpetually carries an umbrella, for such forecasts usually say, even in times of drought, chance of rain, 2%. Her umbrella is about a foot long and patterned with purple pansies. She would be horrified if someone suggested, that its shape was obscene. I suppose I should pay closer attention to weather forecasts and storm warnings. My brother-in-law represents, at least symbolically, the icy white clouds that foretell hail, the farmer's worst enemy. Mark and his friend Bluestein already own a good portion of Johnson County, Iowa, but for some reason have become inordinately interested in the past few months in buying our quarter section. Mark cornered me at his party. Well, Ray, he said, I've decided to make you one more offer for the farm. Bluestein put it in the mail to you this afternoon. He waved his hand vaguely behind him, where Bluestein lurked like a funeral director at a christening. My brother-in-law has always looked to me like a villain from a 19th century melodrama. He is tall, slim, but solid, with hawkish features. His dark red hair, in spite of being carefully styled, slips down over his forehead, requiring him to flip his head every 10 seconds or so, like a bull testing the air for odors of sex. Today, he wears a tight tailored sports jacket that looks as if it has been skinned off a long-haired, cinnamon-colored monkey. He wears a green tie, thoroughly knotted. His hands are immaculate, his ring finger featuring an emerald that, if sold, might get me out of debt. Mark has a wine-colored mustache that turns up wickedly at each corner, apparently of its own accord. I've never seen him twirl the mustache like a genuine villain, but I'm sure he will one day. Tell Bluestein to save his postage, I said, as we headed for the door. Bluestein, Mark's business partner, is a squat little man with terminal 5 o'clock shadow and shifty eyes. Mark, regardless of the queerness of his notions concerning the corn weevil, displays considerable business talent. He and Bluestein own apartments and older homes all over the city, which they rent to students at exorbitant rates. They also own or have optioned several thousand acres of farmland that is planted and harvested by a crew of hired hands, headed by a foreman who wears a black hat and looks a lot like Jack Palance. It is curious that at one time the land barons owned prairie ranches as far as the eye could see. See, I looked up to you guys and I lost my place. There we go. Their authority was eventually undermined, and the farmers took over, dividing the land into checkerboards, each square crowned with white castles of sorts. Now, a new breed of land baron is buying out the farmers one by one, and I suppose the corn farmers, like mine, soon will be operated by computer. Instead of a farmhouse family, there will be a small metallic box studded with red and green and blue lights, which will tell a foreman which quadrant needs water and in which area the cutworms are hatching. You're going to have to face the facts, Mark said to me. Your financial position is no secret. It appears to me that you either have to sell the farm now or lose it in the fall. Even if you have a bumper crop, which doesn't appear likely, you'll never be able to keep up with the mortgage payments. You can't make a living off a quarter section anymore. The days of the small farmer are gone forever. Let's hear it. Okay, so it says you're and I don't know this word, anachronism, ANACHRONISM. And I was going to skip it, but it says it in the next paragraph too. And so it says, let's hear it for the anachronisms, said Annie, joining us. It sounds like a baseball team. The St. Louis, there it is again, anachronisms. I don't know if I'm saying it right. As you know, Mark said directly to me, not even bothering to acknowledge Annie's joke, we're offering more than the place is worth, simply because of Annie. I'd never want you to pay me more than the place is worth, Mark. And by the way, I will not have you tearing down our house and replacing it with a computer. Mark looked at me strangely. We'll get by, said Annie. Sure, you're going to discover diamonds in your cornfield, said Mark. I have a twin brother, an identical twin. His name is Richard. And the only way anyone, including my mother, can tell us apart is that Richard has an 1.5 inch scar on his left eyebrow. When we were about 3, we were bouncing on a bed, and Richard bounced himself off the headboard 4 stitches worth. Mother had us fingerprinted, or rather footprinted. She had our birth certificates tacked to the wall of our room. The reverse side of each featured purplish left and right footprints and statistical information about the mother and father. I'm not sure whether it's just that I've heard the story so many times, or if I can actually remember as a child screaming loudly as Mother held my ankle. Oh, in an iron grip. Woo, in an iron grip and forced my foot onto a cherry-colored stamp pack. Mother claims that until Richard's accident, she often footprinted us in the evenings after our bath, just to be sure which was which. I've often told Annie, only half jokingly, that after I've been away, she should check me over carefully when I return to make sure I don't have a scar on my left eyebrow. Oh, I'd be able to tell, Annie says, grinning her evil grin. Not likely, I say. We tried once when we were about 15 to find something different about us. Anything different. Our voices were the same. People always mistook us for one another over the phone. Our hands were the same size. We were the same height. And our shoes were the same size. I get the picture, says Annie. One night in our room, we set out to see if maybe our private areas were different. Okay. Well, I'm not going to read exactly. So they were going to measure them. They had a steel ruler full of railroad tracks that Mother had as a child. It was cold as hell no matter where we measured from. Okay. But I don't think that was in the movie. But it didn't matter. We were the same length from any and all angles. And if we'd measured circumference, it would have been the same too. Every part of us is interchangeable. The morning of our 16th birthday, Richard came downstairs, flexed his muscles, and said, I'm a man now. I'll do anything I please from now on. Like hell you will, my father replied. They argued for a few minutes, and finally, Richard took a poke at my father. He missed, and his fist smashed through the wall, which was not wood or wallboard, but heavily calcimined wallpaper. Fortunately, he didn't strike a joist, or he might have broken his hand. Richard then walked out the door of that old ranch house not far from Deer Lodge, Montana, and has not been seen or heard from since. Wow. We are nearly to Boston. Boy, this is kind of jumping around a little bit, isn't it? We are nearly to Boston when I finish the story of my baseball stadium and of Shoeless Joe Jackson and the other suspended White Sox. I also tell Salinger about the second coming of the voice. Ease his pain, repeats Salinger in a tone of wonder, shaking his head. How could you possibly know that I was the one the voice was referring to? It must be akin to religious conversation, I reply, something you have to experience to understand. But I was right the first time, I point out. You don't have any witnesses. What if it was all a hallucination? Religious fanatics are known to have detailed visions, and you're obviously a baseball fanatic. Karen and Annie experience it too. When you meet Annie, you'll see how reliable she is. Sorry, I am just taking you to one game. But what pain? I don't have any pain. Well, no more than anyone else. You haven't been to a live baseball game for over 25 years. It's no big deal. To some people, that is not pain. But surely to you. But I stop, fearful of probing further, in case my worst fears materialize. You'll feel better for it. Trust me. We hit Boston at the beginning of rush hour traffic, and of course, I become lost immediately. I travel over a number of bridges and drive along the ocean, trying all the while to weave in the general direction of the Prudential Building, which I know is in the vicinity of Fenway Park and is the one landmark in Boston that I know. But the traffic sweeps my Datsun along like a cork in a swift current, past corners where I want to turn, and I am carried onto and over expressways. I eventually work the car to an exit and return to the bunched streets. Quite by accident, we end up on a main street, and I can see the silvery light standards of Fenway Park. I have to make a left turn. Pedestrians in the east behave like lemmings, rushing dispassionately to their deaths. It takes a good 10 minutes to make a left turn into the blinding rush of oncoming traffic, with pedestrians thronging suicidally at the intersections. As I turn the corner, I enter 2 rows of traffic. Cars bound together like tiny coupled trains stretch over a hill and beyond the baseball park. I picture myself being forced onto another expressway, and in an hour or so reappearing at this corner, only to be swept away again. Then suddenly, like the parting of the Red Sea, a parking place appears 1 row to my right. 2 or 3 cars ease by, the drivers apparently having their minds on home. I turn the car in an S motion, cutting in behind a bus that spews out fumes, black and substantial as octopus oil. As the bus inches forward, I slip into the parking place. I raise my hands. More of a miracle to find a parking place on a baseball night in downtown Boston than for a man to throw away his artificial leg and grow a new one in front of an enraptured congregation, I say to Salinger. He sits impassive. You are not impressed by magic, I say sadly. Are you hungry? I ask as I bend my neck back, letting some of the tension drain from me. We have time to eat before the game. On me, of course. This whole evening is on me. We walk back to a small hill toward a main road. There used to be a Greek restaurant around here, Salinger says. Then, noting my surprise, he adds, it's been years since I've been to Boston, but the geography kind of leaves an imprint. I stop a fat man who looks as if he should know the location of all the restaurants that have ever been in Boston and ask if he knows a Greek restaurant nearby. Right across the street, he says, pointing a monstrous arm, and it says Agen Fair is written in black script across the face of a gray building. You have a good memory, I tell Salinger. He is loping along beside me, taking exceptionally long strides. Do you always wear that hat? He says. It's illegal to farm in Iowa and not wear one, I reply. Bill 1402, passed by the legislature in Des Moines last summer, stipulates that a farmer can be fined 10 ears of corn or a pound of soybeans if he's stopped by the highway patrol and found to be bareheaded. Oh, really? Says Salinger, smiling a little lopsidedly as we run into Agen Fair. The restaurant is part cafeteria, part bakery, and has a glass display case full of Greek desserts, radiating enough calories to power an atomic bomb. The restaurant walls are covered in mirrors. I catch sight of my arms, tanned as burnished maple. I tug off my cap, revealing my forehead, which, in contrast, is as white as sliced chicken breast. I practically dance to our table. I am feeling so manic. I've done it. I am eating supper with J.D. Salinger. We are in Boston, and we are going to see the Red Sox play baseball. What do you do up there on your hill? I say as tactfully as I know how. We have kept the conversation general, although I can tell he wants to ask me questions. And I babble a little bit every so often about Shoeless Joe or Annie or Karen or my stadium. He calls me Ray. Sometimes he addresses me by my whole name. Call me Jerry, he says to me. I have been careful not to address him by any particular name. I have not yet called him Jerry. I very seldom use another person's name in conversation. I think it is because when I sold life insurance, I was deluged with sales material that screams, a man's name is the most important sound he ever hears. And I was taught to work a client's name into the conversation at every possible opportunity. It was as if I was armed with a little basketful of darts with Arthur or Charles or Amos written on them, and could not sell a policy until I had stuck each and every one into my prospect's body. Now that I am free, I try to ease that loathsome period completely from my mind. Salinger, Jerry, looks at me over his plate of moussaka. I am eating Greek salad out of a bowl large enough to wash in. The lime white feta cheese, lime white, that's interesting, resting heavy on the crisp lettuce and tomatoes. I live, I write, I watch old movies, I read, I watch the sunset, I watch the moon rise. That's all. That's all. Isn't that enough? Serenity is a very elusive quality. I've been trying all my life to find it. I'm very ordinary. I've never been able to understand why people are so interested in me. Writers are very dull. It's people like you who keep me from achieving what I'm after. You feel that I must be unhappy, a neurotic, guilt-torn artist. I'm not unhappy, and I have no wisdom to impart to you. I have no pain for you unless, and he smiles mischievously, you and your family were to be plagued with strangers lurking in your bushes, trampling your flower beds, looking in your windows, or, in your case, skulking about your baseball park, crushing your corn sprouts into the ground, and stealing your doormats. Once, someone stole the valve caps off my Jeep. I suppose he sold them or displays them under glass in his library. I don't deserve that. He suddenly shouts, and at the next table, two young men in Red Sox t-shirts look up from their food to see what the commotion is about. I've done nothing to deserve that. I've had 25 years of it. Strangers gawking at me like I was a two-headed baby bobbing in a specimen jar. He eyes me up and down, waiting for my reaction. The lines have been delivered with actor-like precision and projection. The inside of Egan Fair is very old world. Heavy varnished tables and chairs, some of the tables covered with red checked tablecloths. The walls are mirrored, and high on each wall are pink neon phrases written in Greek. Hoping to ease Salinger's tension, I point them out and begin speculating on what they might mean. No trespassing. Don't pinch the waitress, says Jerry, but without enthusiasm. Why are you looking up there? I suggest. A small boy about tabletop height, who has been weaving in and out among the tables in a private game of some sort, pulls a chair out from our table. circles it a couple of times, then slides onto it, trying to coil his lithe little body around it. He has straight, dark hair, delicate features, and eyes the color of Coca-Cola. I know something you don't know, he half sings. I'm sure you do, I say, smiling. Car wash 50 cents, says Jerry. I look at him blankly. The sign. Oh, yes. And that's where I have marked to stop. So I kind of have been going by the number of pages so we don't keep this too terribly long. All right, you guys, that is it for this video. It's kind of been all over the place. So I'm curious to see, they haven't quite made it to the ball game yet. Curious to see how that goes when that happens. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.